Understanding white balance to get accurate colors in your shots. In this video, we're going to delve into the topic of white balance. Now, understanding white balance and how to adjust it is crucial for capturing accurate colors in your photos. And this is going to make sure that your images look natural and true to life. Now, before we jump in, just want to remind you that you can head across to my website, which is www.on3legs.com. That's with the number 3, so on3legs.com. And you can grab a copy of my camera setup checklist. It's free, and a lot of photographers have said it was really helpful. So go and grab that right now if you want. And it's actually going to help you because part of that checklist is checking your white balance settings. Anyway, so what is white balance? Well, white balance controls the color temperature of your photos. And what this does is it compensates for all the different types of lighting to ensure that the colors that you have captured appear like what you saw. So that I guess you could call that they appear accurate. Color temperature is then, you may have heard it measured in what's called Kelvin, and it's shown in thousands, such as 2,500K, 5,000K, and so on. And the lower values are warmer, and they give like a yellow or an orange sort of a tinge to your images. And then the higher numbers, like a 6,000K, is going to be cooler with like a bit of a bluish look to it. And that's the way to think of it. So if you think of like a modern LED light, we've probably all got those in our homes now. You can sort of buy a warm white light. So that's something that is typically what they call warm white. You can buy one called daylight, or you can get one that's called cool white. And the warm white light is more of an orange tinge, like a sunrise or a sunset. With the cool white is more like a bluish tinge. So it's a very, very bluey white sort of look, like snow. So why is white balance so important, in photography? Well, different light sources emit a different color temperature. So for example, when you're outside in the sunlight, it's different from the light that's produced from something like an incandescent bulb in your home, or even like fluorescent lights have an even different color cast to the more shade or overcast skies. So every situation you're faced with as a photographer will have different lighting conditions. Now, without the proper white balance, photos that you take under these different lighting conditions will have an unnatural color cast. So it'll look a bit weird if you don't choose the right white balance. So we need to understand about how we go about setting it. Now, in this video, what I want to do is give you what I feel is the best way to set and adjust your white balance. And essentially, there's actually 4 options when it comes to choosing how you set your white balance. And I'll go through each of those 4 options. And then, of course, like I do with all my videos, I'm going to give you some practical exercises to go away and do to help you understand what it actually does, or what the outcome of each white balance setting is. Now, your first option when it comes to your white balance is to use what's called auto white balance. Now, or you might see it as AWB in the settings on your camera. And what this does is let the camera decide for you. And most cameras have an auto white balance setting, and it works relatively well in most situations, but it does struggle under sort of mixed lighting conditions or unusual lighting. So I don't recommend using auto white balance unless you're not too fussed with the outcome. If you're just doing snapshots in JPEG and you're just running around with your camera and you're maybe on a holiday and you don't want to worry too much about the mucking around with settings, then just leave it on auto, but I don't recommend it. The second option is to use what's called a preset white balance setting. And your camera will typically have several different preset options for white balance. And these sort of, you might see little funny pictures that they'll have. They might have a picture of a house with the sun shining down on it. That would be for daylight, with for shooting in natural sunlight. You might see a house with a cloud over the top, or a tree over the top, and that is white balance for shooting in shaded areas, which can be a bit cooler in the color cast. You might see one with clouds above a house, typically on these presets. That is for overcast skies, and that just adds a bit more warmth to the image if you choose that setting. And then you've got tungsten, which is just a light bulb. So that's for shooting under a normal incandescent lighting situation, which will reduce the yellow or orange cast that those bulbs have. And then the last one will be like a long fluorescent looking light bulb, and this is for shooting under fluorescent lights, and they have a greenish cast, so this will actually reduce that greenish cast for you. The last setting that you'll probably find in your auto white balances is probably flash. Okay, so when you're using a flash can add a cool tint to your images, so it's a good idea just to use the flash white balance setting if you are using a flash on your camera. Now, these are a little better than the auto white balance, because you can tell the camera exactly what type of white balance you want. But I still, I'm not a big fan of even using those settings. I'll get to my favorite setting, and it's actually the fourth option. But option 3 is probably my second favorite setting. And this is where, if you want to be really precise, you can set what's called a custom white balance. Now, this usually involves photographing what they call a white or a gray card under the lighting conditions that you'll be shooting in. So when you get to whatever location it is, you're going to set a custom white balance using this white card, or this what they call 18% gray card. And then using that image, you can set the white balance in your camera, or you don't even usually have to take a photo. On mine you do. You actually take a photo of the white card or the gray card, and that's how I set custom white balance. But every camera is a little bit different, so you need to go about setting that, and we'll talk about that very, very shortly. But option 4, which is my preferred technique, is to set the white balance when I post-process my images. And white balance can be adjusted in post-processing software like Adobe Lightroom or Photoshop or whatever you might use to post-process your images. To get the best results, you'll need to shoot RAW, because shooting in the RAW format, and once again, cameras don't all call it RAW, but you'll be able to find somewhere in your manual. But if you shoot in RAW format, it gives you the flexibility then to fine-tune your white balance without losing any image quality when you post-process. And it's still handy to shoot a picture with a white or a gray card in it when you shoot RAW, and just take a photo of it in the lighting condition, because you can use this in your post-processing software as a reference to set your white balance. Alternatively, in your shots, what you can do is find something in your scene that is white and use that as your reference point, or something that looks like it's about 18% gray. There's a few other tricks, but I won't go into too much detail in this video because it'll get confusing. But they're just some good ways to be able to do it. So I love doing my white balance after the fact in post-processing. Now, like all my videos, as I said, I like to give you some practical tips so you can see exactly how changing these settings is going to affect your final image. And so I want you to experiment with some presets. Try using different presets for your white balance settings to see how they affect your image under different lighting conditions. A good exercise is just to go and shoot the same scene. So go and set up your camera and shoot the same scene using each of your camera white balance presets. So just go through the presets. Sometimes they're on a dial, sometimes they're in the menu, but that'll give you a clear understanding of how it affects your image, because that way you'll see how it changes the color temperature of each image for each preset that you use. Now, if you shoot in RAW, the RAW format, as I said, it retains all the image data, and it will save you having to shoot the same scene over and over with the different presets. You can actually adjust the white balance presets in the software like Adobe Lightroom or something. So if you go in there, you should be able to see all the presets that are available for that image. And if you've shot RAW, it'll allow you to change those settings of each of the presets. And then you can see exactly on your computer screen how it's going to affect the color cast on each of your photos. Now, here's a tip for you, and this is something I often do, especially if I'm shooting underwater when scuba diving, is I do take a white card or a gray card with me, and I take a photo of that for whatever lighting condition I'm in, because this will help you set your white balance when you're in your post-processing workflow. So when you're using Lightroom or something like that. Now, the next thing I want you to try as a practical exercise is try the custom white balance. Now, you're probably going to need to get your camera manual out for this, and I can't tell you how to set it on your camera because each manufacturer has a different way of setting custom white balance. But usually what you do is you'll need an 18% gray card or a white card made for this purpose. And often all you have to do is point your lens at the card and press a button or two on your camera, and it actually sets the white balance. I know on my Nikon D850, all I've got to do is press the shutter button and it sets the custom white balance for me. And you've got to do that in the environment you're going to be shooting, because it looks at that whatever light is there, and because you're telling the camera that is white or grey, it will set your white balance for you. The final tip I'll give you, it's always good to review your photos in your camera's LCD preview screen, and then you can sort of adjust the white balance if the colours don't look right. Because that's it's a big mistake a lot of people make, is that they won't check the images and they'll wonder why their images are looking a bit funny, and quite often it'll just be white balance. And before I forget, as I mentioned at the beginning, I have that checklist for you to download. It's actually a system that I use to remind myself to check everything before I shoot, including white balance, because what can happen, especially if you've been shooting JPEGs and you've got auto white balance, or even worse, you've got a preset white balance in there for a certain condition, you're going to be pretty unhappy with yourself if you left it on your previous settings and take a bunch of images that are in different lighting conditions, and you're going to end up with all these weird color casts on your photo. So that's why my checklist is so super helpful, because it does remind you of each thing to check when you grab your camera, and that way you can make sure that you check each of those things, including your auto white balance. So go and download that checklist. You can download it for free on my website, and that will help you with each and every time you set your camera up for a new shoot. All right. Well, I hope you found these tips on white balance really helpful. If you did, let me know. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer any of those for you. Now, all that's left for you to do is to get out and take some photos. See ya.